Rachel Roberts in this sporting life for her portrait of the repressed young widow.
You've succeeded, we talked about all the odds you've succeeded against, your shyness and the asthma and you know, the background you came from and this sort of thing, and to a point where you are a very, very good actress indeed. What do you think is the one quality that's pulled you through?
I think determination, because when I was that funny little kid in Wales, I used to pray. We all prayed in the family, and I used to say, God, I don't want any help at all, just don't stop me wanting.
When newspapers reported about Rachel Roberts' death on November 26, 1980, it was first speculated to be due to a heart attack. But soon news came out that the Welsh actress had committed suicide. It was the final chapter in a very celebrated, but also very difficult career and an even more difficult private life. Like her co-nominee Patricia Neal, Rachel Roberts was often more defined by her relationship to one of the great stars of the big screen than her own talents. But she was also a fascinating and intriguing artist, a woman completely different from the often cold, emotionally distant character she played on the screen, but also a person of countless contradictions, longing her whole life for more than she had and ultimately not able to overcome her personal demons. A life that even inspired a one-woman show called Who's Afraid of Rachel Roberts?
You supercilious, arrogant bastard Rex!
On the surface, the beginnings of her career do not distinguish Rachel Roberts from many other actresses. She started to act at a young age in school plays, remembering, what I could do was read. I had a good voice, and I could act. She would then continue to act in plays during her time at the university, and then attend the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, and afterwards a repertory company and 1 year performing Shakespeare at Stratford-upon-Avon. Nothing truly remarkable here. But what sets Rachel Roberts apart was her overwhelming belief of inferiority. She never doubted herself on the stage, but would never find herself off the stage, a feeling that plagued her already as a child. I was a riotous success, but it meant much, much more to me. To have some power, some recognition, some respect, some love to combat the already growing belief and fear that everyone else was who they were and I was not. I just have a general sense of the inferiority growing inside me in those childhood years. Most of all, Rachel Roberts would never be satisfied with her looks, a belief that was strengthened by her mother's clear preference of Rachel's more beautiful older sister. I was so convinced I was the ugliest creature on the face of the earth. And this feeling would spark a defining sense of rebellion in her, of overshadowing any self-doubt with as much outgoingness as possible. In school, she was always noted for being a self-willed child, the first to smoke, to dye her hair, to wear makeup, and constantly doing anything to get attention, hiding her introverted nature behind an extrovert show. The principal at the Royal Academy told her that she would become a great actress, but he also added that her personality would get in the way.
Well, Mum was a school teacher, and naturally Daddy didn't have much money. He was a Baptist clergyman, and they insisted that my elder sister and I went through college first. And Mum said she thought I'd grow out of it. And she said if I took my worst degree in the world in education in the University of Wales, if I still wanted to act, I could.
Right from her time at the Royal Academy to her last acting jobs, colleagues and friends always noted Rachel's natural talents and complete dedication to her craft whenever she was on stage, and her difficulties off the stage, always flying in the face of convention. At the beginning of her career, this was mostly a provocative personality, swearing, shouting, apparently senseless behavior. I liked causing scenes with men. I had my fair share of them. It's better to experience something than nothing. But later in life, her behavior would turn into uncontrollable fits of rage and depression, driven by alcoholism and mental illness.
Well, my first film I did in 1952, I think, and it was Valley of Song, and I played Bessie the Milk. I was a girl, I was in my 20s, playing a woman round about my age now, sort of rather derelict old creature. And I saw the rushes for the first time, and didn't in public, but went to my dressing room and cried, because I couldn't believe that I could look so horrible.
Well, I never. Geraint Llewellyn.
Bessie the Milk. Well, how are things with you?
Oh, just the same, you know. Never any news, much in compan.
After her graduation from the Royal Academy, Rachel Roberts would stay only for 1 season in Stratford. She was passionate about acting, but also very restless and impatient, and her personal behavior did not help to prolong her stay. I was very self-assured on the stage, but I don't think I was one to win any popularity contests. She also had a love-hate relationship with English performers, and her Welsh personality would always make her an outsider in the English acting establishment for the rest of her life.
You have to go, John. I'll bloody well kill her.
She then worked in small plays in London and appeared in various neglectable movie roles, until she got the chance to appear in Othello at the London Old Vic, filling in for a sick Wendy Hiller. Her performance was such a success that she received a solo curtain call. This attention would then help her with a big break in 1960 when she appeared in Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, a key film of the British New Wave, co-starring newcomer Albert Finney. Her acclaimed performance would even win her a BAFTA as Best Actress. But this success would cause a dangerous downward spiral. Rachel Roberts certainly wanted to act and cherish the acclaim, and in public, she made statements like this.
Now, does the fact that you got this major award for very much kitchen sink sort of play, does it worry you at all?
You mean would I have preferred to have had an award for a classical part?
Yes, exactly.
Well, I've got no great ambitions to be a Sarah Bernhardt. If I was good at being a Sarah Bernhardt, but I'm not. I've no ambitions to be a great big leading lady. I rather like the kitchen sink sort of acting.
You're quite happy, in other words, as you are.
Yes.
But in private, she said about her BAFTA, "For all the good this has done me, I might as well be dead." Because she actually wanted to be a different actress than Saturday Night and Sunday Morning suggested. The movie and her success typecast her as a character actress, real, earthy, lower class, ungiving. But she wanted something else. She wanted to be a movie star, glamorous, beautiful, envied. A dangerous obsession with fame and the ideas of stardom had begun to grow inside her. An obsession that soon found its fulfillment, but would again only increase her mental decline. In 1960, Rachel Roberts met Rex Harrison during her work in the London theatre. Rex was already a sensation in New York and London due to his stage success as Professor Higgins in My Fair Lady. He was completely different from anything that Rachel Roberts had known so far, and at the same time, everything she always wanted. He was famous and rich, he stood for the star system, the name above the title, the main reason why audiences came to see a show. This is not to say that Rachel Roberts was only attracted to him due to his money and fame. It was more his entire personality and what he stood for that swept her off her feet. I desperately wanted him to approve the way I looked. I began to feel justified, not plain, but pretty. I was so overwhelmed by his charm, his elegance, his sheer bloody sophistication. Rex was successful, he was acclaimed, and he had chosen me. Rex had by this time been married 3 times, and friends knew that he was not the kind of person who could live alone. And in Rachel Roberts, he had found a new companion. To him, she represented the new kind of London theatre, and her outrageous behavior fit his own personality very well. As Rachel put it, his temperament was just as difficult as mine.
Oh, my poor girl.
Your what?
You must be so terribly in love with me. That heartbroken little letter.
Mine?
With her relationship to Rex Harrison, Rachel Roberts would enter the kind of glamorous life she had always craved for. He introduced her to a world of movie stars, grand hotels, and his villa in Italy, a time that would stay in her mind forever. Writing before her death, "I was bowled over by Rex and Italy. I return endlessly to those years." For her, Rex Harrison elevated her to a new life. She enjoyed the attention and felt confident at last. And her professional life would also reach its peak when she was again offered the kind of role she actually dreaded. A stern, emotionless landlady in this sporting life. Director Lindsay Anderson remembered that Rachel at first rejected the role, but then committed to a screen test. She had great doubts about her ability to play Mrs. Hammond, because she's a very held-back woman, a passionate person, but someone who's turned puritanical through so much constant repression of her feelings. Rachel was afraid of this. However, at this point in her life, Rachel Roberts was still looking for acting challenges, and accepted the role. Lindsay Anderson later described her as a person lacking in self-confidence, but completely sure of herself the moment the camera started to roll. And co-star Richard Harris also had enormous respect for her talents.
Can't you get it into your head? We don't need you.
Upon release, The Sporting Life was praised for its tragic quality and called emotionally striking, poignant and touching, powerful, honest and brutal. And critics said that the character of Frank made Hud look like a mama's boy. However, some reviewers also noted that the movie didn't say anything that Room at the Top or Saturday Night and Sunday Morning hadn't said before.
These people at the top, they are the same as anybody else. But you had it inside of you to be so much bigger than any of them.
And Rachel Roberts saw the best reviews of her career for her work, which would also win her another BAFTA. Hers was called a perfect and inspired performance, and she was praised for playing her cold role with just enough sparks of warmth. Furthermore, critics applauded her as an actress of breathtaking radiance, and she was often regarded as the standout of the film.
I'm just trying to be friendly.
Well, I'm not going about all day with a grin over my face just to make you think I'm happy.
Those positive reviews were then followed by a Best Actress nomination at the Oscars. Rachel had reached the peak of movie stardom. But even here she did not have this moment to herself, as Rex Harrison was also nominated for Best Actor the same year for Cleopatra.
Nothing like this has come into Rome since Romulus and Remus.
During filming The Sporting Life, Rex Harrison and Rachel Roberts had gotten married, so they became one of the few husband and wife teams nominated for Oscars in the same year. And in keeping with her adoration of her husband, Rachel publicly stated that he was much more deserving of the award, as he was giving a superb performance under much more difficult circumstances than she. In the end, none of them took home the trophy that year. But Rex would of course win the award 1 year later for the movie version of My Fair Lady. But I can say right away that Rachel Roberts' feelings of inferiority clearly affected her judgment of her own work, as her performance in The Sporting Life is a far more interesting, affecting and haunting portrayal than anything Rex Harrison did the same year.
Shouldn't have come here if you're going to behave like this.
We're paying for it, aren't we? That's all they're interested in.
No, it's not. Not if you're going to act like a pig.
Watching The Sporting Life, it immediately becomes clear how perfectly Rachel Roberts fit into the dark and gloomy world of the new British wave. Her Mrs. Hammond feels at every moment a product of her environment, a woman keeping it cold in her house to save coal, or feels pure embarrassment when presented with a new coat or a new car.
Don't worry, you'll never get me to go in that thing.
The contrast between character and actress is certainly impressive, but even more impressive is the unfiltered distance in her performance. Her Mrs. Hammond never for 1 second gives the impression that she is toying with Frank's affection.
What is it you want to make you go?
Her rejection is real and hurtful, and few actresses are able to be so cold that the screen seems to freeze from a single look.
Rachel Roberts as Margaret Hammond. Savagely embittered by life, she returned his love with a burning, passionate hate.
They all laugh at you. They all point you out. Don't you know that? Trying to be different. And they point me out too, Andy and Linda. We're not proper people now because of you.
Mrs. Hammond is a role that totally contradicts Rachel Roberts' off-screen personality, and yet at the same time fits her like a glove, and represents everything that made her such an intriguing screen presence. Even in smaller parts, such as Murder on the Orient Express, Rachel Roberts' hard face, her cold and suspicious glances, and her tight body movement left a lasting impression. But This Sporting Life offered her a lot more and gave her more chances to add depths and layers to her characterization. The role might be of secondary importance to Richard Harris's Frank, and I know many people consider her supporting, but I definitely see her as a co-lead. We only learn about her through Frank's memories and as an object of affection, but she too always comes across as completely her own personality, not shaped by anyone's expectations, and like Patricia Neal's Elma Brown, never supporting anybody.
I wish you wouldn't try and work me into a fit. I've asked you before to leave me alone that way. I can't stand it.
Both Elma and Mrs. Hammond only exist on a page in relation to their male co-stars, but both actresses gave them dimensions that go beyond the limits of their occasional appearances.
That's how I am. I've nothing more to give you, Frank.
You don't mean that.
Wish you wouldn't work me up like this, telling me how I should feel. If only you'd leave me alone a bit. You're so big, Frank. You're so stupid. You don't give me a chance.
Even in his own imagination, Frank cannot picture Mrs. Hammond as anything else than cold and dismissive. But there is something in Rachel Roberts that makes it understandable why he is so drawn to her. that she is not just a woman he wants to conquer, but that he has honest affection for her, something that she refuses to believe. Mrs. Hammond does not see herself as inferior as Rachel Roberts so often did, but instead only sees harm and trouble in others, shutting the world out not to be heard again after the death of her husband. In this way, she is almost like an evil ghost that haunts the presence of this sporting life, but there is a human dimension in Rachel Roberts' work that makes her startlingly real.
You want to kill me!
Eric is dead, you understand that?
Eric is dead! You make me feel I'm nothing!
I want you!
Oh, you want to crush me, but I won't let you, because I'm the one thing you can't have like everything else!
I want you!
I want you to go!
I need you!
I want you to go! I want you to go! I want you to go!
Rachel Roberts leaves it open if Mrs. Hammond has become the kind of woman she is after the death of her husband, or if she had always been like this, driving him to what many say was a suicide and not an accident. Even right to the end, Mrs. Hammond cannot be truly understood. But Rachel Roberts finds the right balance to keep this aura engaging for the audience.
He went like that, I felt I hadn't been proper to him. I hadn't made him feel as if he belonged.
When she earnestly smiles, it feels as if all the tension from the story suddenly disappears, and you realize how much of the movie's aura comes purely from her screen presence. She is able to destroy all happiness around her with just a few words, or makes you suddenly feel for her with a longing glance.
We worked in an ordnance factory, making bombs. You should have seen us. All women. We had some times. It's a bit more than I got when my husband died.
Well, isn't that right bloody handsome of you?
You didn't have to do anything for it.
You mean I didn't have to get killed for it?
Some people have life made for them.
I also have to applaud the chemistry between the two leads. Both so completely different performers and characters, they still manage to create a believable relationship that never turns into love, but is always marked by hate, loathing and self-loathing, and yet still feels tender at certain moments.
All right. But just for Christmas, mind.
Rachel Roberts gives a haunting and heartbreaking performance that stays with the viewer long after the movie is over, and the sheer power of her presence overcomes any limitations of her screen time, always leaving us wanting more. Which is not necessarily what I would say about her husband's work the same year. Rachel Roberts did not use the Oscar nomination in any way to advance her career. Instead, she would not appear on the big screen again for 5 years, almost completely abandoning her profession and instead enjoying her life as Mrs. Rex Harrison. I'm not ambitious anymore. I don't want to be a great success, to be a star, to have an acting career. With Rex, I have the perfect life. It can be assumed that at this time she truly believed those words, but when she looked back years later, she would say, I chose Rex over my craft. I threw away my talent. I know now that glamour doesn't exist. I thought it did. A mistake. But Rex also actively prevented Rachel from taking more acting jobs, because he too had the same attitude towards their profession. For him, it was also about fame and glamour, and he encouraged this attitude in her. Which also explains why she looked like this when her Oscar nomination was announced. Rex looked down on the parts Rachel Roberts excelled in, on her reception as a character actress, and instead made her wait for parts that were never offered to her. He had also advised her against accepting her role in The Sporting Life, considering exactly the kind of dowdy part and project she should avoid. But beyond this professional setback, the marriage to Rex Harrison also affected Rachel's life in a different way. While she had already been an experienced drinker prior to meeting him, their marriage truly saw her turn into an alcoholic. As friends noted, Rex could have as much as he wanted, but he would get up the next day and go to work. Rachel, however, couldn't take alcohol and would often be a completely different person after one glass, angry and abusive.
You drank a full quart of gin.
You take that back, Mr. Lop. You take back every one of those words you just said.
For a while, Rex enjoyed Rachel as a drinking buddy, and at the beginning of their relationship, friends also noted that she was uncharacteristically placid, hiding her worst impulses, but as the years went on, her alcoholism and mental illness worsened as, despite enjoying the life with Rex, she continued to suffer from her own insecurities. She was ashamed of her looks when partying with Hollywood stars and then overcompensated these feelings with the most outrageous behavior. The determination to shock and provoke, from imitating dogs and barking at other people to peeing in garden ponds, making crude and obscene remarks, but then also making too big a show of hospitality, desperate to be liked and accepted. Looking back at these years, she wrote, "I felt apologetic for my own inferiority, and so got noisy and outrageous. And even though she publicly pretended to be happy in her role as Rex's wife, she also missed acting, growing depressed over her lack of work as, for her, acting was living, and she needed the praise and love that it brought to her. I tried to give up work completely, to be just a wife to Rex, but I came increasingly to miss it. It's in your blood, and that's that. I did so want to be a great actress. I remember the awards I'd won, and how amazed I was when I won them, how I don't always take my talent seriously. I was far too impulsive and was so dazzled by Rex." In 1965, Rachel tried to commit suicide for the first time, and in 1969, Rex would announce their separation and their divorce became final in 1971. In 1970, she still talked to newspapers that they both loved each other and that they would likely never divorce, and when it was official, blamed herself in interviews. During this time, she made another suicide attempt, and getting back together with Rex became an obsession for the remainder of her life. However, she would also continue to act. After having not worked so long, she again overcompensated, chasing every role available. Her most notable later screen work was in a supporting role in Yanks, for which she received her third BAFTA. Director John Schlesinger had also guaranteed her an Oscar nomination, but this promise did not come true.
Meryl Streep in Kramer vs. Kramer.
She would also continue to work on the stage in England and the US. In 1974, she was nominated for a Tony for Best Actress in a Play for 2 stage performances in the same year.
Rachel Roberts, the New Phoenix Repertory Company.
She also appeared on TV in The Tony Randall Show until the writers felt that her character became unnecessary. She had taken this part again with the hope to find true stardom, but later called the show her most hated job, humiliating and degrading.
Have you ever in your life, been in love with anyone other than your husband?
Whatever makes you think I was in love with him?
In the years after the divorce from Rex Harrison, Rachel's mental state continued to decline, and her outbursts, fueled by her increasing alcoholism, became more frequent and more severe. Co-star Tony Randall praised her discipline in front of the camera, but privately thought she was crazy. Broadway producer Hal Prince called her disciplined on the stage, but was puzzled by her constantly outrageous behavior off the stage. Everyone who worked with her noticed that the moment she stepped off stage or the cameras were turned off, she would immediately get drunk. During an appearance on the Russell Harty show, Rachel Roberts was so drunk and out of control that the tape of her appearance was destroyed before it ever aired. In 1980, her depression would begin to take complete control of her, and she became more irrational. In the months of her death, she met Rex Harrison, who was having another career renaissance thanks to My Fair Lady, one last time, and realized that, even though Harrison continued to support her, a reconciliation would never happen. "Rex won't have me back, nor should he. I have nothing to give. I've tried psychiatrists, I've tried AA, I've tried Indian religion. I've been in and out of homes and clinics and house farms. I've tried sobriety. I've tried prayer. I prayed that Rex would be the answer. I've never got over my days with him, and however much I try, I can't. I am getting worse and worse. What am I so terribly frightened of? Life itself, I think." Rachel Roberts was certainly a difficult, but also a fascinating person who tragically suffered from many demons and, due to her health and her private life, did not work as much as many of her contemporaries, and is therefore often not remembered the same way. But I highly recommend you check out her available work. It is a testament to her talent that, despite her flamboyant off-screen nature, she could so completely inhabit these kinds of withdrawn, repressed parts that she is most remembered for.
All my ladies have said so.
For her, acting was an intense experience, and this intensity is tangible in many of her film performances. As she said, I was born to act. So let's move on to the next nominee.